FDI in China plunges. Japan and Taiwan accelerate their exit by 92%. Apple shifts 40% of iPhone production. Foxconn cuts 100,000 jobs. Canon shuts its factory. Peasants who helped the CCP seize power are now controlled to death and banned from returning home. Widespread fury grows. Will a new revolution soon erupt? Once defending the nation, now left homeless. It is the tragic fate of Chinese veterans, exploited and discarded by the CCP. China's real estate and financial markets collapse. Home prices plunge 78%. Banks dump assets. Citizens lose a lifetime of savings. Hong Kong is slowly dying after falling into CCP hands. A once-in-a-century mega-fire exposes total system failure. FDI in China plunges 92% as Japan and Taiwan accelerate their exit. Apple shifts 40% of iPhone production. Foxconn cuts 100,000 jobs. Canon shuts its factory. The strategic rivalry between China and Japan, along with U.S.-China tensions, has triggered a massive wave of Japanese and Taiwanese companies withdrawing from mainland China. The sudden shutdown of Canon's Zhongshan factory on November 21st marked a significant turning point, reflecting rapid changes currently underway in China's manufacturing landscape. Canon stated that the sharp decline in the laser printer market and the rise of Chinese domestic brands caused prolonged difficulties. After many attempts to adjust failed to reverse the situation, the company decided to terminate all operations in China. This closure left thousands of workers unemployed, with many expressing shock and uncertainty about their future, even questioning if geopolitical factors were behind the decision. However, the development at Canon is just part of a larger trend. In 2025, several major Japanese corporations began scaling down or exiting the Chinese market. Mitsubishi Motors, seeing a more than 50% drop in sales in China and Asia in fiscal year 2024, announced suspending production and sales in China, closing its joint venture plant in Changsha. Panasonic also shifted direction, stopping production of low-end home appliances in China and shutting down lines in Tianjin and Heng, although the company continues to invest in electric vehicle-related operations. Toshiba and Sharp have significantly reduced their presence, with Sharp quietly removing several smartphone models from its China website and shifting focus toward medical devices and commercial displays. Tamura Electric announced it would relocate part of its production to Japan beginning in late 2025, targeting a 30% reduction in China operations by 2028. TDK Corporation is also moving battery production to India, impacting local workers in Dalian. In the retail sector, Family Mart closed nearly 100 stores in northern China, while Lawson paused expansion and shifted to franchise models to reduce risk. Rising tensions between China and Japan throughout 2025, particularly after Japanese Prime Minister Sai Takitaki said the self-defense forces might respond to a Taiwan emergency, fueled strong reactions from Beijing. China sent warships to disputed waters, issued travel warnings, restricted imports, and increased economic pressure on Japanese companies. According to the Japan External Trade Organization, more than 20 bilateral business engagements were canceled, undermining corporate confidence. Meanwhile, Japan and Taiwan have drawn significantly closer. On November 15th, the two sides signed an intelligence sharing agreement and reaffirmed support for Taiwan at the G7 summit. Economic cooperation has become a central pillar, especially after Taiwan's TSMC began production at its Kumamoto plant in April 2025, forming a semiconductor alliance designed to reduce reliance on China. Taiwan will remove all food import restrictions on Japan. While public sentiment strongly encouraged consuming Japanese seafood amid diplomatic tensions, a parallel exodus is taking place among Taiwanese companies. New Taiwanese investment in China dropped to just 2.7% in the first half of 2025. On November 18th, Jingbao Electronics, a manufacturer in Dongguan with nearly 10,000 employees at its peak, announced its closure and completed liquidation after moving operations to Thailand. This follows years of Taiwanese factories leaving the manufacturing hub of Chengdu due to the U.S.-China trade war, rising geopolitical risk, and increasing labor costs. At the same time, China's labor market is weakening further as Foxconn, the largest assembler in Apple's supply chain, faces empty production lines, reduced working hours, and mass layoffs. In 2022, Apple shifted 40% of its iPhone production to India, forcing Foxconn to dismantle production lines and prepare for possible cuts of up to 100,000 jobs. Viral videos showed long lines of workers at Foxconn Zheng waiting to process their resignations. The new iPhone Air sold only 50,000 units in 2 weeks in China, forcing Foxconn to halt additional production lines ahead of a full shutdown expected by late November. Under the America First policy of the Trump administration, global companies continued relocating production out of China to restructure supply chains. For the first time, Taiwan's exports to the United States surpassed its exports to China. During the first 10 months of 2025, Taiwan's exports to the U.S. increased by more than 60%, while exports to China rose only 13%. Taiwan's trade surplus with the U.S. climbed to $112 billion, far exceeding the $63 billion surplus with China. China now faces a sharp decline in foreign direct investment. FDI fell to $8.5 billion in the third quarter of 2025, a 92% drop from its peak in early 2022. Industrial parks are emptying, unemployment is rising, and concerns about the country's economic future are mounting. Economists warned that China's downturn is no longer cyclical, but a full-scale collapse with crises hitting real estate, supply chains, youth employment, and middle-aged workers forced into early retirement. While state media continues to promote an image of prosperity, public sentiment is increasingly pessimistic, with many believing that the worst is still ahead. Peasants who helped the CCP seize power are now controlled to death and banned from returning home. Widespread fury grows. Will a new revolution soon erupt? In 2025, China is experiencing a darkly ironic historical cycle. Economic and social shocks are pushing tens of millions of migrant workers back toward the countryside at a time when they no longer have a place in the cities. Yet they are not allowed to return home. This situation exposes deep institutional contradictions and places unprecedented pressure on the Chinese Communist Party's governance system. More than 80 years ago, the CCP seized power under slogans of land reform, turning over to become masters, and the strategy of the countryside encircling the cities. The blood and livelihoods of peasants powered that revolutionary movement. But after taking power, peasants did not become the masters they were promised. Instead, they were pushed to the weakest position within state structures, with land tightly controlled, household registration restricting mobility, social welfare often excluding them, and livelihoods severely limited. They were labeled a low-tier population with insufficient land to farm, no jobs to take, and no real freedom to choose where to live. In 2025, as China's economy sharply contracts, tens of millions of migrant workers are being forced to return to their villages. Yet, many local governments have issued directives to strictly prevent large-scale returns and long-term stays. This effectively blocks citizens from coming home, even when the cities where they worked have already stopped hiring and are pushing them out. Being unable to remain in the city, yet unwelcome in the countryside, has created unprecedented instability for a massive segment of the population. This development reflects a deep fear inside the government. On November 13th, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs held a meeting in Yunnan introducing the policy formula of 2 stabilizations, 1 prevention. For the first time, they explicitly emphasized preventing the formation of a large-scale return-to-village wave. Authorities fear that the mass return of migrant workers will reveal the fragility of urban economic structures, fuel a surge in poverty relapse, and raise the risk of social unrest. Data shows that China has about 300 million rural laborers, with more than 180 million working away from home. They contribute over 30% of the nation's GDP. However, by 2025, the real unemployment rate for this group is believed to exceed 10%, with youth unemployment near 19%. Wage arrears disputes have surged, while job opportunities have shrunk so sharply that some people submitted thousands of applications and received only a few dozen interview offers. One representative case appeared in Hingyang, Hunan Province.
After the 2026 Lunar New Year, more than 183,000 migrant workers are expected to return home, with 40,000 having no plans to resume work. Average wages have fallen from 6,000 yuan to 3,000 yuan, approximately $424. Work a few days, stop a few days has become the norm. Recovered wage arrears amount to millions of yuan, and hundreds of legal disputes have emerged.
If the national rate of stranded rural returnees reaches 20%, approximately 36 million people, the government's rural revitalization campaign may collapse. The year 2025 also marks the largest wave of factory closures in 3 decades. Industrial zones in Dongguan, Shanghai, and coastal provinces have seen foreign capital exit, orders evaporate, and widespread business shutdowns. Urban manufacturing jobs have fallen by 15 to 30%. Meanwhile, the service and commerce sector, once viewed as the backbone of China's internal circulation strategy, has also faltered as household incomes drop, leading to the breakdown of the domestic consumption ecosystem. For millions of young workers forced out of the cities, returning to the countryside does not mean stability. Many discover that farmland in their villages has already been transferred away. They no longer have land to farm. Pensions amount to only around 200 yuan, approximately $28 US per month. There are no jobs in the village and no environment for entrepreneurship. Lying flat becomes the only option, yet it is still a dead end. The government's need to impose tight control on return migration illustrates its inability to manage the rise of a new demographic group, one with organizational capacity, a broader perspective, and the willingness to demand rights. According to civil rights lawyers, if the rural migrant workforce awakens, it could become a force capable of transforming China's social landscape. This wave of return migration is not merely an economic crisis. It reveals a widening fracture between the state and the people, in a situation where even the basic right to go home is monitored and restricted. Once the population is viewed as tools, variables, and controllable risks rather than human beings, the decline of the governing system becomes inevitable. The unfolding return migration wave is increasingly seen as a potential starting point for a new cycle of social awakening within China. Once defending the nation, now left homeless, this is the tragic fate of Chinese veterans, exploited and then discarded by the CCP. On November 15, 2025, a video posted by the ex-user known as Yesterday circulated widely. The clip from Luong County in Yunnan Province shows a militia member who fought in the Sino-Vietnamese War being forced to kneel and crawl before government officials just to secure a monthly subsidy of less than 1,000 yuan. The footage has drawn widespread public attention across China. Once hailed as heroes who defended the nation, many former soldiers now find themselves reduced to begging for meager support. Observers note that under the CCP system, it has long been common for the regime to fatten corrupt officials while neglecting former servicemen. For those unwilling to kneel and plead, many have chosen a different path to express their discontent. Through numerous public statements, a growing number of veterans say they have completely lost faith in the ruling party and are withdrawing from all CCP-related organizations. One veteran, Zhang, who was also a party member, said he witnessed widespread corruption and the increasing hardship faced by loyal members. Meanwhile, he noted that ruthless and inhumane officials are becoming wealthier and more powerful. Declaring he would not become a burial offering for the party, he announced his withdrawal from all party, youth league, and young pioneer organizations. Similarly, former soldier Chu Rung from Zheng stated he had once been misled by what he called the evil specter of the CCP, believing that aligning with the party was the path to advancement. But after understanding the reality, he recognized the party's nature of falsehood, evil, and struggle, along with its violent ideology. He announced he would sever all ties with the CCP and its affiliated groups, adopting truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance as his moral guide. China's real estate and financial markets are collapsing. Home prices have plunged 78%. Banks are dumping assets, and citizens are losing a lifetime of savings. A blogger revealed, "Let me show you something. This home was sold in May 2021, right? It is located in the China Resources International Residential Complex in Nanjing. The price back then was 4.25 million won. The shocking truth is that by October 2025, the same apartment sold for 950,000 yuan, a loss of 3.3 million yuan, approximately 466,000 US. Another recent transaction shows the same pattern. A two-bedroom apartment, 70 meters in size and close to a high-speed rail station, sold for just 95,000 yuan. That is under $15,000, a price level almost unimaginable only a few years ago. Many homeowners are facing similar situations. One man said he bought his home for $800,000, but it is now worth just over $200,000. His loss amounts to well over 500,000 yuan after more than a decade of mortgage payments. He said every sacrifice he made has amounted to nothing. China's property market is now sinking deeper than at any time in recent years. Major cities, along with third and fourth tier cities, are seeing home prices collapse. Many homeowners report that the value of their properties has evaporated within months, falling back to levels last seen 10 years ago. Many people born in the late 1980s and early 1990s believe life would have been much easier had they simply not bought a home. On November 9th, a woman known online as the Mother of Three described how her family bought at the peak of the market, believing a home would bring stability. Instead, the mortgage trapped them. With 3 young children, she cannot work, and the entire household depends solely on her husband's salary. Missing even a single paycheck could collapse their finances. The family has reduced their meals to simple dishes, and every penny is saved to keep mortgage payments on time. She said, "Even if we skip meals, the mortgage must be paid first. Once you buy a home, you work for the bank for the rest of your life." Mortgage inversion, where the home value falls below the remaining loan balance, is now widespread. Many families must even borrow additional money just to sell their homes. Years of repayment have ended with the painful realization that the home is not worth enough to cover the remaining principal. Meanwhile, Chinese banks are dumping huge quantities of repossessed homes, something never seen before. As of November 2025, at least 23 financial institutions have listed seized properties on platforms such as Alibaba and J.com. Since summer, around 70,000 foreclosed units have been put up for sale. In Sichuan province alone, rural credit institutions have listed more than 24,000 units. The scale of these listings now exceeds the number of new homes sold in Shanghai throughout all of 2024. Smaller banks with weaker financial buffers have been forced to sell at steep discounts to recover cash quickly. For example, a property listed at 200,000 yuan would translate to around $28,000. The rapid release of these assets shows how many borrowers can no longer meet their obligations and how quickly collateral values have deteriorated. A destructive cycle is now unfolding. Falling prices trigger mortgage inversion. Mortgage inversion increases defaults. Defaults expand the volume of bad loans. Banks dump foreclosed homes, which pushes prices down further. What begins as household pressure now spreads across the entire financial system. Beijing no longer has the capacity to rescue the entire banking network as it once did. Economic growth is slowing, the real estate sector is weakening, and new bad debts are emerging every day across thousands of small and medium-sized banks.
A full rescue would place an unbearable burden on public finances. As it stands, large banks receive protection while smaller institutions must fight for survival. Allowing banks to sell properties directly sends an unmistakable signal. The era of blanket bailouts has ended. In this environment, cheap bank-owned homes do not guarantee lower risk.
These properties may have construction defects, unpaid fees, unresolved tenancy issues, or further price declines ahead. A low price is not the same as safety. Altogether, the situation reveals a stark and unavoidable reality. Under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party, China's economy is sliding toward a structural breakdown. Ordinary citizens work tirelessly for decades, saving whatever they can. Yet, when the market cracks, their entire life's earnings evaporate. Hard labor no longer leads to stability or security. For countless families, the truth has become impossible to ignore. They are not working to build a future, but merely to survive inside an economic system that is hollowing out from within. Hong Kong is slowly dying after falling into CCP hands. A once-in-a-century mega-fire exposes total system failure.
Since the 中共产权党复试 imposed the Hong Kong National Security Law, ending the One Country Two Systems Model 27年育儿和推进香港向逐图资委的 mainlandization, many observers say they have rarely followed news from the city. However, at the end of 2025, 一个无预计的事件乘客香港重新掌握世界媒体注目。It was not a milestone achievement, but a catastrophe described as unseen in a century.
The massive fire at the Wangfut Court residential complex in Taipo became a symbol of tragedy. On November 26th, a fierce blaze broke out during renovation work at the estate. 7 of the 8 towers were quickly engulfed in flames. Initial figures showed at least 128 deaths, 83 injuries, and 150 people missing, making it the second deadliest fire in Hong Kong's history since the 1918 blaze at the Happy Valley racecourse.
Analysts note that the tragedy is not only the pain of nearly 1,100 households at Wangfut Court, but also a reflection of the deep shifts in governance under Beijing's tightening control. Many experts observe that since the 2019 anti-extradition bill protests, Hong Kong has entered a phase where authorities pay far less attention to public opinion and human rights than in the past. The 2019 District Council election, held after nearly 6 months of protests, once reflected the public will of Hong Kong. The pro-democracy camp won a landslide victory with 388 out of 452 seats, while the pro-establishment camp kept only 59. However, instead of responding to public demands, Beijing and the Hong Kong authorities implemented sweeping measures to consolidate control. After the 2020 pandemic, the National Security Law was enacted. The electoral systems for both the District Council and Legislative Council were overhauled, and a large-scale purge replaced all Democrats with individuals deemed patriotic by Beijing. By 2025, observers say the CCP has effectively completed its takeover of Hong Kong. From the chief executive to the District Council, Legislative Council, and the judiciary, all key institutions are in the hands of those loyal to Beijing. The original promise of one country, two systems has largely been replaced by de facto one-party rule. In this context, questions emerged following the blaze. Who is responsible? Were there illicit benefits exchanged between the construction company and government officials? And how will authorities handle the tragedy? The renovation project at Wangfut Court involved 230 million yuan. The contractor had been accused by residents of using thin, non-fire-resistant safety nets and violating building regulations more than 140 times. Many believe that the sky-high renovation costs hint at possible collusion and profit transfer between officials and the company. 2 days after residents publicly warned on social media that the nets posed a severe fire risk, a pro-establishment district councilor dismissed the concerns as fear-mongering and insisted that all materials used were compliant and government-supervised. But when the disaster struck on November 26, 2025, the warnings proved accurate. Within 24 hours, the government arrested 2 directors and 1 advisor of the construction company on charges of manslaughter. During a press briefing on November 28, Secretary for Security Chris Tang claimed that the scaffolding nets had fire-retardant properties. He asserted that the fire likely started from the lower-level nets, spread to other sections, ignited foam ceiling materials, and that burning bamboo pieces fell and caused further ignition on other floors. These explanations immediately triggered public skepticism. Experts question why the supposedly fire-retardant nets had almost completely vanished while bamboo, normally highly flammable, remained mostly intact. Some argued that the actual combustible materials were the real culprits, while bamboo was being scapegoated to divert attention. Legal analysts pointed out that the disaster appeared to be 30% natural and 70% man-made, citing delayed detection, slow emergency response, and deficiencies in firefighting equipment. Others argued that after Hong Kong's full mainlandization, the construction sector had increasingly absorbed mainland-style practices, including cutting corners, corruption, collusion, and non-compliance. Observers believe that during the investigation, any issues involving abuse of power or illicit profit by officials may be concealed or minimized. A few individuals may be selected as scapegoats, while those most responsible could escape accountability. The Wong Fuk Court tragedy raises profound questions about governance, transparency, and public safety in a Hong Kong that has fundamentally transformed under CCP rule. We'd love to hear your perspective. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you found this video helpful, please share it with your friends. Your support keeps us going and inspires us to deliver even better content. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth analysis from China Crisis. Thank you for watching.